Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. Chip is off this week, but with me is my special guest, Jessica Hamilton. And Jessica's been doing some fantastic work with the Marfan Foundation. We're going to talk a little bit about that, find out more about what Marfan Syndrome is, and what else she's got going on. So, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Jessica. I live in Connecticut. I'm a real estate agent, and I'm a single mom of two girls. My oldest daughter has a very specific genetic disorder, so we are involved with that. And just like to get out and about in Connecticut, see what Connecticut has to offer, and kind of just be the best mom that I can.
All right. Well, as I said when I was introducing you, you're doing some work with the Marfan Foundation, and that's the condition that your daughter has, correct?
Yes, so it's called Marfan Syndrome. It's actually a genetic condition that affects the connective tissue that supports, of course, your entire body and your organs.
All right. So you said it affects the connective tissue. Affects it how?
So, a lot of people with Marfan syndrome, they have a lot of different physical traits, but the connective tissue that is running through our entire body kind of keeps all of our organs working. So, a lot of times, folks with Marfan that typically they don't know that they have Marfan syndrome, and they can have dissections and aneurysms. So it's highly correlated with the heart. So the average life expectancy, even with having Marfan's, is 70 years, but a lot of the times it goes undiagnosed unless there's already a family history. So it's not something that's super prevalent. It's really rare, and a lot of times families, it's kind of it comes about with one particular person, which is what happened in our family. 5 weeks before my husband and I got married, he had some like heart pains, and his mom had some heart problems. So she had a cardiologist, sent him to bed. He woke up the next day. He still wasn't feeling well. She made him go to see her cardiologist. And it was decided that he had dissected his aortic valve in his heart and had to have emergency open heart surgery. And he was 23 years old at the time. So it was super traumatic. It was scary. And that's kind of how we came about to this. So while recovering from open heart surgery, one of his nurses in the ICU asked, "Do you have Marfan syndrome?" And he said, "I don't know. What is that? I've never heard of it." So it was from a nurse just being inquisitive and really knowing a lot about the disease. And we ended up becoming part of a genetic study. And we are a family that is now taught about for doctors that are going through the different rotations and stuff when they have to learn different things. So there's a lot of different signs, but people with Marfan's usually are tall and slender. They have really long arms, legs, hands, toes. His pinky toes were as long as my pinky finger, if that gives you any kind of like perspective of just how lanky someone with Marfan's can be. They have like really crowded mouth. So when my daughter needed braces, she had to have first have a palate expander kind of expand her palate so it would even do justice. So everything is kind of compacted and make them really, really slender. So that's really quite the spine, the site of a Marfan's person. A lot of them you'll see are people that play basketball because height. I mean, Tom was 6'4 3/4. My daughter's 16 and she's 5'11. So height is definitely the number one indicator.
Yeah, the first time I had ever heard about Marfan syndrome was actually in school
Mm,
because Abraham Lincoln had Marfan syndrome, and
correct.
that was my first exposure to it was when I was learning about Abe Lincoln.
Yes. Yeah. Oftentimes people don't remember that. So that's pretty impressive, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah. So folks with Marfan, they have, when they end up having children, they have like a 50-50 shot of their child getting it. And so when our daughter Isabel was born, she was born with Marfan's. There's really, you can only really do a blood test to test for a specific genetic marker. So we waited until she was born. We didn't get the amniotic test or any of that kind of stuff because we were having her regardless. And so she was born with Marfan's. And like I said, she's 16 years old. So I did ask her what her perspective of living with Marfan syndrome is. And I do want to just read the little blurb that she wrote down for me because she's at work and couldn't be here today.
Go ahead.
She said, so quote unquote from Isabel, my mom asked me what it's like to live as a teenager with Marfan syndrome. Well, if you can remember your teenage years, I'm sure you'll make a face saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And, oh, I wish I could go back, and so on and so forth. Although I'm living in those times that I'm supposed to be in the quote unquote prime of my life, those moments are shrouded by anxiety and insecurity. I'm often described as lanky, my chest pokes out in a weird way, and often I have to sit out from sports and other activities. I've seen a cardiologist since I was 5, not even knowing really why I was there, just that if I was good, I would get to go to McDonald's after. I'd always been a good spirited kid despite it, but I can't deny it still made me different. Every Murphy's kid is different from one another and they have different experiences than me. But with the funding they need, they could afford a chest brace like I have or surgery to fix their heart or brain someday. So that's, a direct verbiage from a 16-year-old living with this. And while there have been tons of medical advances, there is no cure for Marfan's. Luckily, because of Tom's diagnosis, we knew she had it. So she's been monitored since she was born. She does take a beta blocker to kind of slow down her heart rate so that it doesn't enlarge and dissect or have an aneurysm. But the Marfan Foundation is fantastic. They're really good with families. So, as we all know, in this day and age, the insurance landscape has changed, and insurance doesn't really cover everything. And Isabel has just recently, within the last week, started wearing a brace around her chest to kind of help the bone structure. Like I said, she's super narrow, so trying to help that bone structure because it's painful when she lays down to sleep. So they help families that can't afford to get things like this, the braces and surgery. And, we all have insurance, but it doesn't cover everything and it can be quite costly. So for the families that really can't afford anything, the foundation does help with providing, again, like she said, braces, surgery, a lot of the times, even medication. So again, a lot of people have, different dissections. Her grandmother is the one that is like the top lineage in the family that has it. And she has had multiple open heart surgeries. She has a synthetic valve in her heart, as did Isabel's father, who unfortunately passed away at 33. And, his mother has always already had aneurysms in her brain. She has stents through her brain all over. So the connective tissue portion of it, we really don't realize in our body what connective tissue does, but it really keeps us put together. And so
Yep.
without that help, it's and being monitored constantly, it can really change someone's life.
So, I mean, it can be a dangerous situation. I mean, you started off saying, they can have a lifespan of 70 years, which is fairly average. But now you're talking about multiple aneurysms, heart problems. How does your daughter deal with all of this? Does she, I mean, you said there's no cure, but there are apparently treatments. You said she's on beta blockers.
Yep. So she's on beta blockers. There's quite a few sports she's limited from participating in. There's certain activities, even in gym class in school, that she can't do. So again, like I said, luckily we knew that she had it, so she's been monitored. And with every new thing she wants to try, we really do get cardiology to approve it. So a long time ago when she was a lot younger, she was trying different things. She really fell in love with tennis. And unfortunately, it's that out on the tennis court, you're running really quickly over to this side and then really quickly over to that side and stopping. And so that quick start and stop is really actually not good for your heart if you have this condition. If you're a healthy person without the condition, tennis is great. But having this condition and putting that undue stress, exercise is clearly good for everybody. So she does exercise, but she has to do limited activities, walking, biking, Swimming is great for people with Marfan, so it's kind of limiting those type of activities to negate having any of these dissections.
All right. And now you said the Marfan Foundation helps families afford these treatments, afford, I assume, the medical checkups, all of that. What have you been doing with the foundation?
So we just recently got involved, and it's really so. Isabel's been going to a cardiologist since she was 5, and she's had absolutely no changes in the last 3 years in the size of her heart. So she, gets echocardiograms every single year. And thankfully, her last appointment went so well. They said, "We'll see you in 3 years." There have been no changes. She's looking good. So that's a super, super big blessing. But she then recently, her bone structure, she's been complaining about the pain and stuff. And so then we went to get a surgical consult, and then, she just started talking about it a lot more. And I think we didn't really get involved when she was younger because there was like this stigmata around it for her. And like her verbiage said, it really produces a lot of anxiety for her. So, um, she has been, her father passed away at a very young age from this. And so she's obviously worked with therapists and support groups and things of that nature to kind of cope with it. But, she's just recently wanted to get involved. So her and I took a look at the website. And then when I was doing a network event and was able to talk about it and start doing that. So Isabel and I are just going to start doing things like that, helping network and fundraise for this foundation, and then we're also going to get into doing 5Ks together. Not that we're necessarily going to run them, but we can walk at those 5Ks. And so we're going to just try and do those different things to help support the Marfan Foundation. Back in the day, we used to do everything through the American Heart Association because that was kind of near and dear to our heart as well, because it was a lot of open heart surgeries that have happened through our family because of Marfan's. But Marfan Foundation is really gearing toward helping families specifically with this syndrome that's often overlooked.
That's fantastic. And how does she feel about being able to give back working with the foundation? How has that affected her?
I think it's empowering her. So I think a lot of the times, especially when people have something that the general population knows about, they've heard about it, everybody knows somebody with cancer and things like that. But when she says, "Oh, I have Marfan syndrome," everybody says, "Huh? What's that?" So when you have something and it's kind of like an invisible disease, she's not really, if you don't know the symptoms to look for in this, you don't know. You just think she's a tall, slim kid. She wears clothing that kind of hides the protruding chest and the different things like that. So I think she's always lived her life hiding this part of her. But I think that the foundation and the community helps her now realize that she doesn't need to hide it. And this is a part of her. It doesn't comprise the entirety of Isabel, but it's a part of her. And other people have that as well. And they're all going through it. And, some people are going through different phases of it where surgery is now something that they need to do. And that's really scary. And so I think she's lived a lot of her life actually in fear, coupling it with her father passing away at the age of 33. It's a lot to do with your mental health around having something like this as well, and growing up with it. Like she said, when she was 5 and in the cardiologist's office, she just knew that she was at a special doctor and she needed to, act like she was in a doctor's office. And now she really knows, you know, with the internet and kids having phones at young ages, she's researched this and is probably more of a subject matter expert than I am. And, she just really wants to give back. She also is going to be going to school for therapy herself. She wants to be a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I think that has kind of, having this has kind of led her down the path of really knowing and understanding like that perspective of it and the coping with it, and that. So this is kind of her gateway into supporting others with Marfan's and being more active in something that affects her life every single day in more ways than one.
Yeah, it really is an experience, living with a medical condition that affects you like that.